Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another one of the Travel Mole broadcasts. I keep on saying it, they're related to COVID, but hopefully this is going to be one of the few ones when we mention it. In the future, we're just going to be talking about positive things. We're going to be talking about petals, pleasant smells, sunshine, and full hotels. But what's the reality? The reality, in particular, in one of the biggest travel nations in the world, that's the United States of America. What's the empirical view of what they think about travel? And I'm delighted on the other end of this line to have one of the top men in research in travel in the United States. And he is himself the top man within Longwoods International. And that's my friend and colleague, Amir. Good evening, Amir.
Good evening, Graham.
How are you doing?
Doing pretty well. Just trying to stay busy and make sense of all these crazy times like everyone else.
Yeah. You've just, like today, have given us your latest research, which had what I would be tempted to say is slightly negative feeling, slightly down on the positive feel that we've had this side of the Atlantic about domestic travel in the United States, in that less people feel inclined to travel than they did a couple of weeks ago. I wonder if you could give us a little insight into those figures, and also the fact that some people are probably less positive about welcoming visitors into their community.
Yeah, we've been conducting this travel sentiment study of American travelers during the pandemic since the very, very beginning of the pandemic here in the United States. Our very first wave was right at the beginning of March 2020, and every 2 weeks since then, we've been going out and asking 1,000 American travelers, a good representative cross-section of the U.S., a short survey about their sentiments towards travel and pandemic-related issues around travel. And we've gotten some very telling data in especially the last couple weeks here in the last wave or two. So this morning we released the 43rd wave of this research. When we started this, Graham, we thought it would be 6 months and we'd be done with it. And here I am 16, 17 months later still doing this, but that's okay. We'll do it as long as we have to. But the long story short is we're seeing a reversal on a lot of key travel sentiment indicators. We've been making a lot of progress. American travel sentiment was definitely on the upswing. We were seeing a lot of great indicators and people in terms of people feeling safe to travel outside their own communities, people feeling good about welcoming visitors back into their communities. We were seeing all these pandemic highs of the good kind of pandemic highs of numbers here until the last few weeks. And the Delta variant, the news of the Delta variant, the realities of what that's meant has really shaken the traveler psyche in a few key areas here. So first of all, as you mentioned, 1/3 of American travelers have now indicated to us within the last week here that they have postponed travel directly due to the Delta variant. And that's either postponing travel to later this year or even as much into early next year there. So that's quite significant, especially when I tell you that we asked the same question for the first time 2 weeks ago, and it was only 1 in 4 American travelers. So we've gone from 1/4 to 1/3, an exponential growth in literally just 2 weeks. So that's quite telling. And then again, conversely, from the American resident side of things, we've seen a 20-point drop in those willing to welcome visitors back into their communities now. We went literally from 2/3 of American residents saying, yeah, I'm great with having these visitors coming back into our community now, to just under 50%, about 47% to be exact in this last survey. So we've seen a major reversal. We've seen people telling us now that they're much more concerned that COVID is going to cause them to change their travel plans. And that's playing itself out in so many different ways right now.
That's very worrying, I would think, for the tourism and hospitality industry in the United States, who appear, again, from this side of the Atlantic, to have been relatively prosperous due to domestic travel in the last 12 to 18 months. Places in Florida are giving me figures of 75 to 80% hotel occupancy, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if those figures start to drop down, and with your international borders tucked up and buttoned up very, very tightly, That's quite worrying, isn't it?
Well, it is. There's definitely some alarm bells going off right now, but I wouldn't say the sky is falling just yet. There's also data that shows that despite this concern and the impact the impact it's having on traveler psyche, there are still some good numbers out there. For example, conversely, 86% of American travelers are still telling us they have plans to go somewhere in the next 6 months. Now, whether they change those plans or not remains to be seen, right? But if 86% of travelers still have the intent to travel, that means that their psyche has been shaken, but it hasn't been deterred. And I think as American, at least speaking for American travelers, we've seen that as this pandemic progresses, their tolerance for risk and the risk they're willing to take just to get out and get away seems to be growing. Obviously, a lot of that's aided by vaccination and so forth. But there's a certain acceptance that's happening that COVID's going to be with us for a while. And I'm not going to get into the politics of vaccinations, but I can tell you that it is that is happening from that perspective. In addition, it all depends on how long this surge is going to last. The prior surges seem to have lasted. Again, let me preface by saying I'm not a medical professional, so I'm not qualified to speak to the medical side of things. But looking at the data, looking historically over the past year and a half, we're in our fourth major surge now with this Delta variant here in the U.S. And the surges seem to have lasted about between a 60 to 90 day cycle in the past. And if this one holds true, that means that we probably will be seeing it abating sometime around late September to mid-October. And if that happens, then the impact might just be seasonal, and we may still see a stronger rebound afterwards.
I also noticed in your research that when people do go on vacation, that they're actually using not only Google, which is an obvious thing, but they're using word of mouth to plan their destinations. In many respects, that's very encouraging for someone that's smidgen over the age of 40.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in the same boat with you, my friend. It is. Word of mouth has always been really strong as a source of information. Obviously, there's even greater reliance on it now during the pandemic because people are turning to their friends, neighbors, relatives who have dipped their toe in the water, so to speak, and taken that trip to Florida or out west or wherever they've gone, and are looking for the tips. Hey, was this place? This is the first time where really cleanliness and safety are equated almost exactly the same in the minds of the traveler, right? So the question is always, is it clean? Is it safe? And they're meaning the same thing. So getting those tips on where they went, was it too crowded? Was it I'm watching this chatter happening in all these circles all the time in there. So yeah, it was interesting. We asked that question. Search engines, number one, word of mouth, number two, but number three was actually destination websites. So it shows you that the destinations are seen as experts and kind of the kings of curating content of what they have there. So to all those in this side of the business and for all those within the industry, make sure your destinations have the most current and reliable information.
Very good. The burning question, of course, this side of the this side of the channel and the Atlantic is when will the borders open for United States? At the moment, as we've said, they're tucked up and buttoned up pretty tightly. Canada is open, I think, for US visitors. It's going to open for the UK on 7th of September. But airlines, tour operators, travel agents, both sides of the Atlantic are looking for a relaxation in the protocols and the inhibitants to international travel across the Atlantic, not just here in the UK, but in other parts of Europe. Do you have any feel for that? What might or might not happen? As I understand it, one of the issues is that the American government currently does not recognise the AstraZeneca vaccine as one that might protect you properly. I'm living proof that it does, having contracted COVID after having double vaxxed. What do you feel? What's the whisper on the travel street?
That's what we call in the States the $64,000 question. If I knew the exact answer to that, I'd be a very wealthy man at the moment, placing a lot of bets. But, word on the street is we may be getting closer. Obviously, the Delta variant surge was a major setback. I think things were accelerating, the talks were accelerating nicely until we hit the surge. And again, not a health professional, but I think, we're the government's doing its best to go through steps of diligence. But for those of us in the travel industry, myself included, it is frustrating because yes, I can now finally, after a year and a half, go visit my Canadian colleagues that I have an office in Toronto and haven't been able to see them physically in a year and a half, and I'm planning that trip. But they still can't come see me, So that's frustrating. And as the vaccines become prevalent, and here in the U.S., there's a lot of talk about vaccine passports. In the EU and in the UK and other countries, they've already kind of figured out nice apps will show you, you've got your, the green pass, I think it's called, some places and so forth.
Yeah.
We don't have that here. A few states have it, but we don't have it on a national database. So there's a lot of steps that need to be implemented, that need to happen. Hopefully they happen sooner than later. But I will tell you this, American travelers and residents are generally feeling good about the resumption of international inbound travel to the U.S. We asked a question a few weeks ago in one of our surveys, and 56% of Americans said we're great with international travelers coming back in as long as they're showing some type of proof of vaccination. So if the boxes are checked and we're following the science as we're asked to do so, and logic has it there should be a way, and that's just me putting my own personal hat here, but there should be a way to make this faster and more efficient and get there. But you know what? That's why we're in the private sector, and government's government, right?
Yeah. Now, I know that you were in Colorado recently at one of my favorite hotels, the Broadmoor, Colorado Springs, with some of your destination colleagues around the US. What was the sentiment? You're the king of sentiment. What was the sentiment amongst your colleagues there about how bullish were they about travel in 2022 and possibly even into late fall, early winter in 21?
Oh, I just come back from two gatherings. First of all, the Destinations International Annual Convention in Baltimore about 3 weeks ago, a couple of weeks ago in Colorado Springs at the U.S. Travel Summer Board meeting. And
US Travel, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's all good. And I must say that the optimism and the resilience is there. Everybody is feeling rather bullish. It's a cautious optimism because the Delta, the impact of Delta was just starting to emerge, and when we knew that things like this can derail progress. But look, we've seen on the domestic side here in the U.S., the leisure sector travel recovery appears to have, at least until Delta hit, was pacing faster than most experts had predicted, right? I mean, you're looking at, if you're a beach destination in the Southeast U.S., you are seeing basically record-breaking visitation to your destinations, and so you saw that happening. Business travel, most recent reports I've seen it's at about 40% of pre-pandemic level, domestic business travel here in the U.S. Obviously the international traffic is nil, but meetings and conventions were coming back online, especially as we look deeper into the third and fourth quarter of this year, so forth. So everybody's feeling pretty optimistic and bullish. The real question is, what will the patterns be? What will the patterns be? Is it going to be, with leisure travel, as soon as the vaccinations started en masse here in the U.S., you saw the great release of pent-up demand happening this summer across the country, and again, mostly the outdoor and water and coastal destinations, and inland resort destinations benefited more than, say, the big cities did. But even those city numbers are starting to turn nicely now. So we're seeing. So we saw that happen at a good pace, but is that sustainable? Is it going to happen that way? You saw an American traveler that didn't spend their vacation money last year, so they still had that. They were given some government stimulus checks. They had that to put in, to put into the economy. And for the most part, unless you were working in the tourism and hospitality sector, a lot of the sectors that lost jobs recovered quite nicely. And so we're looking at, on all our surveys, it's not seen as an economic issue. So people with money ready to go, getting out. But now that they've gone out, and a lot of these people that went out, they spent a lot. Hotels in the Southeast, in the U.S. and the coastal destinations, for example, there were hotels that were getting 2 to 3 times what their average rate was prior to the pandemic, because the demand was there. And they were doing that with a less of a workforce. We have a labor shortage here right now in the hospitality industry and other segments of the service economy across the country. They were doing it with less workers. They were getting double or triple the rates, and travelers were willing to do it just because they were desperate to get to the beach or wherever they wanted to go. Is that traveler going to be acting the same way next year? All things being equal, let's say the surges get under control. Let's say we finally hit the herd immunity in terms of vaccinations and so forth. What is that pattern going to be with the traveler? That's the biggest concern right now. Will we be able to, have a discernible pattern for how these new consumer patterns will be in terms of travel spending, and will we have the workforce to meet the demand?
Very good. Well, it's all, as always, Amir, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you about all of these matters. I suppose the big news and the big positive is that college football is only a matter of hours away, isn't it? Yeah, I saw it. I saw it.
So I'm going to be a good member of this travel industry. I'm with Ohio State University. I'm not an alum, but I live here in Columbus, Ohio, so I'm a fan. Ohio State plays their very first college football game of the season in Minneapolis in a couple weeks, and I'm going to be there.
Good man, good man. Well, I know that Virginia Tech are going to take all the college football accolades this year, so we don't need to worry too much about that. But once again, Amir, thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate it, and I look forward to speaking to you maybe in 2 or 3 weeks' time, and we can discuss what the sentiment has changed, if at all.
Look forward to it, Graham. Thank you so much.
Cheers.